When a scruffy voice yelled, "Don't eat that!" from the sidewalk, no one at the Willow Grove Bistro imagined the chaos that would follow. Nestled between high-end boutiques and a bubbling marble fountain, the cafe was a midday haven for the city's elite. The sun filtered through the sycamores, glinting off polished cutlery and half-filled wine glasses. Inside the patio, servers glided between tables with practiced ease, delivering gourmet plates and aromatic espresso. The scent of sourdough and lavender mingled in the air, but for one man at the center table, the charm had worn thin. Seated with calculated posture was Franklin Bishop, a titan of industry whose fortune began in tech startups and bloomed into a vast investment empire. Now 74, his tailored navy blazer and silver-framed glasses spoke of old money and unshakable status. He scanned the menu without urgency, his fingers betraying a slight tremor. Across from him sat Elena, his wife, barely past 30, her beauty sculpted and strategic. She looked every bit the fashion editorial, from her sleek raven hair to the ruby gloss on her lips. Her diamond-studded watch caught the sunlight each time she flicked through her phone, offering only distracted nods in Franklin's direction. Just outside the cafe's iron fence, a boy hovered in the shadows. His name was Jaden. Thin and wiry beneath a tattered hoodie, he moved with the practiced subtlety of someone who'd learned to disappear in plain sight. His eyes swept the tables, part hunger, part habit, lingering on plates, handbags, and distracted glances. People had seen him before. They just never remembered. Franklin checked his watch, his tone even, but laced with quiet irritation. "You're somewhere else again." Elena glanced up, flashing a smile that sparkled more from habit than sincerity. "I'm right here," she cooed, stretching her manicured fingers across the table to rest gently on his. "You know how much I treasure our little afternoons." Just beyond the iron fence, Jaden's stomach churned with hunger. He edged closer, barely making a sound, his fingers gripping the metal bars as his gaze locked onto their table. A bowl of creamy bisque, a basket of artisan rolls, and a flute of chilled, sparkling water. It looked like something out of a dream. But then something shifted. As Franklin reached for his phone and adjusted his spectacles, Elena's hand slipped into the soft leather of her luxury tote. Jaden's eyes narrowed as her fingers wrapped around a tiny glass vial. With a graceful motion, she uncapped it and let a few drops slide into the soup, the liquid vanishing without a trace. Jaden's breath hitched. He froze. She stirred the bowl gently, her face an unbothered mask of poise. Then she leaned in, her words soft but deliberate. "After all I've had to deal with, you're not going to ruin this." Jaden's pulse quickened. Did he really just see that? Could someone so flawlessly composed in such a refined setting be capable of something so sinister? He ducked behind the railing, trembling. The iciness in her voice still echoed in his ears. His fists clenched, nails pressing into his palms. No one else had seen it. No one else had noticed. He was alone. The low rumble in Jaden's stomach brought him back to the moment, but his eyes stayed locked on the pair at the center table. Franklin looked drained, his spoon hovering over the bowl while his thumb scrolled mindlessly on his phone. Eleanor was a portrait of elegance again, all effortless grace and polite smiles, her chin resting on her hand like nothing had happened just moments before. But Jaden knew better. The pressure in his chest mounted, his instincts urging him to walk away. Why get involved? Who would believe a ragged kid in a fraying hoodie, loitering on the edges of a world that had never let him in? He glanced around. The diners were lost in their own bubbles, sipping champagne, exchanging stories, utterly unaware. But when his gaze snapped back to that spoon, lowering now toward Franklin's mouth, his breath caught. He wasn't imagining it. He had seen her drop something in there. And if Franklin ate it, Jaden was sure it wouldn't end well. His pulse pounded. He didn't know this man. But that didn't matter. Right was right. The seconds stretched, dragging like anchors, and then, without giving himself time to hesitate, Jaden shoved off the railing and stormed toward the table. His knees trembled, but he didn't slow. His voice cracked as he yelled, "Don't eat that!" Every head turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A fork hit the ground with a clang that seemed to echo off every wall. Franklin froze, the spoon suspended inches from his lips, his eyes locking onto the boy. Elena spun around, her expression flipping from surprised to icy in an instant. "What did you just say?" she snapped, her voice razor-sharp. Jayden stood firm, his voice unsteady but loud. "She put something in your soup. I saw it. Don't eat it." Gasps swept across the patio like a ripple in still water. The hush that followed was deafening. Jayden didn't move. He didn't run. He held his ground. Breathing hard, chest rising with every surge of adrenaline, Franklin looked from the boy to his wife, confusion flashing behind his glasses. "Eleanor, what's he talking about?" he asked, voice controlled but uneasy as he slowly set the spoon down beside the untouched bowl. Elena's mask cracked in an instant. She shot up, her chair screeching sharply against the stone. "You filthy little liar," she spat, her words sharp enough to draw blood. "How dare you accuse me of something so disgusting? Who let you in here?" Her venom hung in the air, but Jayden didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on Franklin's, willing the man to believe him. "I saw her. She dropped something in your soup when you weren't paying attention," he said, his voice finding strength. "Smell it if you don't believe me." Franklin's face drained of color. He turned toward Elena, his jaw tightening. "Elena," he said, quiet but resolute. "What's going on?" She let out a breathy, dismissive laugh and waved him off. "He's just a street rat looking for a handout. Look at him. He probably wants money or food." Her glare shifted back to Jayden, brimming with disgust. But Jayden stood taller, stepping closer to the table with clenched fists. "I'm not making this up," he said, louder now, unwavering. "She didn't want you to know, but I saw everything." Franklin's hand hovered over the bowl, frozen in the growing tension, caught between the disbelief bred from a lifetime of skepticism and a gut feeling he couldn't ignore. The cafe, once filled with laughter and casual chatter, had fallen into an eerie stillness. Diners sat motionless, their attention riveted on the confrontation unraveling before them. Franklin leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing on the boy. His expression shifted, not yet trust, but no longer dismissal either. It was the look of a man who'd seen too much of the world to ignore instinct. But this time was different. The boy didn't back down or drop his gaze. Jayden held firm. Franklin narrowed his eyes, his voice even but cautious. "Jayden, right?" The boy gave a quick nod. "Yes. I swear I'm telling the truth. Please, don't eat it." His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made people listen. Eleanor let out a sharp, humorless laugh and crossed her arms, glaring him down. "This is ridiculous," she said coldly. "He's just some street kid trying to stir up drama. Are you seriously considering this, Franklin?" But Franklin didn't respond. He lifted the spoon again, bringing it closer to his face, not to taste, but to study. His hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from the rising storm of doubt and realization. He lowered the spoon and looked at her, slow and steady. "Elena," he said, locking eyes with her, "you heard what he said. What's going on?" Her expression tightened, the calm cracking at the edges. "I can't believe you're even asking me that," she snapped, her voice louder now. "It's insulting." She turned toward the gathering crowd, her voice rising with each word. "He's lying. Just look at him. He probably doesn't even know who you are. Why would you trust him instead of me?" But her words didn't land the way she'd hoped. The crowd had started whispering, eyes bouncing between the woman with fire in her tone and the boy standing his ground. "She looks nervous. That kid doesn't seem like he's lying." The murmurs rippled through the patio, and Elena's composure crumbled further. With a sharp crack of fury, she slammed her palms against the table, her carefully curated elegance unraveling. "Enough, Franklin. Eat your damn soup and let's go," she hissed, her voice raw and shaking. But Jayden stood his ground, stepping even closer, his fists clenched so tightly they turned white. "If you don't believe me, then call someone. Have it tested," he shouted, the urgency rising in his voice. "You're rich. You can do that, right? You've got lawyers, doctors, people who can get answers. But don't eat it," Jayden pleaded, his voice firm. "If you do, you'll regret it." Franklin's jaw tensed as he looked down at the bowl again. The spoon remained in his hand, but he made no move to bring it to his lips. His eyes, weary yet sharp, slowly turned toward Elena. "You've been Off. For weeks now, he said quietly. Her face went pale as she stammered. I don't know what you're talking about. You can't seriously think I'd poison me? Franklin cut in, his voice now like a blade. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The crowd audibly gasped, their murmurs rising into a wave of unease. Jaden didn't budge. His heart pounded like a drum, but his expression stayed locked and unshaken. He had said what needed to be said. Now the decision rested with Franklin. Elena straightened, her face hardening into a mask of defiance. "This is insane," she snapped. "I'm not going to sit here and be humiliated like this." She reached for her bag, preparing to storm out, but Franklin's hand moved fast, gripping her wrist with surprising force. "You're not going anywhere," he said, voice low and steady. "Not until we figure out exactly what's going on." The waiter, who had been frozen like the rest, finally found his voice. "Sir, should I call the authorities?" The question sent a jolt through the air. For the first time, real fear flashed across Elena's face. "No," she said quickly, her voice rising. "Don't you dare. This is just a huge misunderstanding. Franklin, please, you can't be serious." But he raised his hand, silencing her without looking away. "Yes," he told the waiter flatly. "Call them." A ripple of stunned silence swept through the bistro. Jaden felt a breath of relief pass through him, but he knew this was only the beginning. The truth was still buried beneath tension and denial. As the waiter rushed inside, the entire cafe held still, every eye on the table. Franklin slowly released Eleanor's wrist, but his eyes never left hers. The flawless veneer Eleanor wore so easily was crumbling, replaced now with a visible wave of panic. Her eyes darted around the bistro, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came, only the look of someone trapped with no exit. A few feet back, Jaden stood rigid, his hands trembling. He'd spoken up, done what he thought was right, but doubt began to creep in like a cold draft. What if Franklin didn't believe him? What if she twisted things and turned it all around? He clenched his fists, forcing his feet to stay put. Then, cutting through the tension like a blade, Franklin spoke. "Jaden," he said, voice clear and direct. "You said you saw her pour something into my soup. Can you tell me what it looked like?" Jaden nodded quickly and stepped forward. "It was a small bottle, like one you'd use for medicine, clear liquid. She did it when you were looking at your phone, then stirred it in like nothing happened. I swear, I saw it." Franklin's jaw tightened as he turned to Eleanor, whose head was already shaking. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "He's making it up. Why would he lie?" Franklin interrupted, his voice edged with cold logic. "What could he possibly get out of this?" The crowd stirred once more, their whispers rising like wind through trees. In the distance, the sound of sirens sliced through the air, drawing closer. Elena's eyes flicked toward the noise, and for just a heartbeat, her mask dropped completely. She looked cornered, vulnerable. Then she spun on Jaden, desperation in her tone. "You've been watching us, haven't you? Jealous of people who actually made something of their lives? Is that it? Trying to ruin things you don't understand?" The accusation hit Jaden like a slap, but he didn't move. "I'm not jealous," he said evenly. "I saw what I saw, and I couldn't just walk away and let you hurt him." The sirens grew louder, until 2 officers stepped into the cafe, cutting through the heavy silence. Their uniforms brought a different kind of hush over the room as they approached, hands near their belts, scanning the scene. "Can someone tell me what's going on here?" one asked, his voice calm but firm. Franklin stood slowly, his presence still commanding despite the weight of age. "Officers, I need you to take a look at this," Franklin said, gesturing calmly toward the untouched bowl. "This young man claims my wife poisoned it." The 2 officers exchanged a glance, their faces unreadable as one leaned in, cautiously sniffing the soup. He straightened and turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say about this?" Her cheeks flushed deep red. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He's just some street kid stirring up trouble. Franklin, you're seriously entertaining this nonsense?" But the officer didn't blink. "We'll need to test the contents," he said, reaching for the bowl. "No!" Elena barked, her voice loud and jarring. The outburst drew more attention. Heads turned, phones lifted. Her reaction spoke louder than her protests. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, is there something you want to share before we proceed?" Elena's breath grew shaky, her chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. She looked between the officers and her husband, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Then her composure gave way. "Fine," she hissed, her voice low, trembling with fury. "You want the truth? I'm tired. Tired of living in his shadow. Tired of him holding all the power. He wasn't supposed to live through this year." She stopped cold, her eyes widening as the words escaped. The silence shattered into a chorus of gasps. Some patrons instinctively reached for their phones, capturing every moment. Franklin stood frozen, his face draining of color as her confession landed like a blow. The officer stepped forward, his tone flat and final. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. Keep your hands where I can see them." Elena's carefully built world collapsed in seconds. She screamed, thrashing as they pulled her arms behind her back. "You don't get it. I deserved what he had. All of it," she cried, her voice echoing as they led her out, the entire cafe watching in stunned silence. Franklin sank slowly into his chair, his hand trembling as he pushed the bowl aside. For a long moment, he said nothing. His face was etched with disbelief, the lines around his eyes deepening with the weight of betrayal. Then his gaze drifted to Jaden, who stood motionless, unsure if he should stay or disappear. But something in Franklin's expression shifted. Anger gave way to a quiet, weary gratitude. The boy hadn't just prevented something terrible. He'd unveiled a truth Franklin might never have uncovered on his own. Around them, the cafe cautiously returned to life, a murmur of whispers replacing the stunned silence. Some guests stared with sympathy, others with uneasy curiosity, but Jaden didn't move. He stood frozen, uncertain of his place in the aftermath. Then Franklin turned toward him, his voice softer now, but carrying authority. "Jaden," he said, motioning to the seat across from him. "Sit." Jaden hesitated, glancing around at the lingering stares, but something in the man's tone compelled him to obey. Slowly, he lowered himself into the chair, his body rigid with tension. "You saved my life," Franklin said plainly, the words heavy with meaning, "and I have no idea how to repay you for that." Jaden shifted nervously, his fingers curling over the edge of the table. I couldn't let it happen," he said, voice quiet. "I couldn't pretend I didn't see it." Franklin gave a solemn nod, his eyes momentarily distant as the events replayed in his mind. "Most people would have," he said. "They would have looked away, told themselves it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. That took guts, son." Jaden's shoulders rose slightly in a shrug, his voice nearly lost beneath the hum of conversation. "I guess I just don't like watching people get hurt. That's all." Franklin leaned back, his eyes studying the boy. Not as a stranger anymore, not as a ragged silhouette on the edge of society, but as a person with depth and resilience. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. The question caught Jaden off guard. He looked away, unsure how to answer. His voice low with embarrassment, Jaden muttered, "A while." Franklin's brow furrowed, but he didn't push. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black phone. "Wait here," he said, stepping away to make a call. Jaden watched him nervously, his pulse racing. Had he crossed a line? Was Franklin calling someone to have him escorted out? But when the older man returned, his expression was calm, almost gentle. "Help is on the way," he said plainly. "Help?" Jaden asked, uncertain. Franklin nodded. "I called someone I trust. They'll make sure you have a safe place to sleep tonight. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to do more than that." Jaden's eyes widened, his voice instantly defensive. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly. "I didn't do this for money or anything." Franklin gave a faint smile. "I know. That's exactly why I want to help. You did what most wouldn't. And believe me, Jaden, if more people in the world were like you, it'd be a far better place." For the first time in what felt like forever, Jaden felt something stir deep in his chest, a warmth he didn't recognize at first. He looked down, unsure of what to say. Around them, the cafe slowly emptied, patrons drifting out in quiet groups, but the memory of what had happened still hung in the air like the echo of a bell. Franklin lifted his glass, took a long sip of water, then looked across the table. "Sometimes life hands us the chance to rewrite someone's story," he said softly. "Today, you rewrote mine, and maybe I can help rewrite yours." Jaden looked up, his dark eyes shimmering with something he hadn't let himself feel in years: hope. As the two sat in stillness, the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden shadows across the cafe, and those who had witnessed the moment carried something with them as they left, a quiet reminder that courage doesn't always come dressed in power, and compassion doesn't always come from privilege. Sometimes it's the overlooked who carry the greatest strength of all. In the end, Jaden's bravery didn't just save a life, it reminded everyone in that cafe of the power of speaking up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for more powerful stories of courage, truth, and redemption. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that even the smallest actions can spark life-changing moments.